Hello everybody, June here. So I know that it is already the middle of June and I'm only now getting around to filming the May 2019 sewing and knitting projects, and I say that it seems like every other month, but I actually have a pretty good reason this time around. It turns out that since the beginning of the month there has been some road work like right outside my window in my apartment, and they have been using jackhammers like 2 or 3 at a time, drilling, digging, and it has been so loud. And I kept waiting to see when they would stop, but they don't seem to have an end date coming at any time soon. So I figured this was as good a time as any to film this video. And so if you hear some very loud noises, that's what it is. So May was actually a very, very light sewing month for a couple of reasons. So I ended up only making 2 things, but one of them was actually very complicated, and it was the reason why it was such a light month. And that is the Hampton jean jacket by Alina Design & Co. And this jacket was a labor of love more than anything that I have ever made before. And I think even more time consuming and complicated than jeans, than the 2 pairs of classic case patterns ginger jeans that I've made. So this pattern has been on my radar for quite some time, and I always thought that, oh my gosh, this is so complicated, I don't think I'm up to the challenge. But then at the beginning of the year I actually put this on my Make 9 because I really wanted to make it, and there are so many pattern pieces, and I got it printed about the PDF version, and so I got it printed and I looked at it, and there were so many pattern pieces that was so overwhelming. So I kept putting it off, and then one day I was like, that's it, I'm not putting this off anymore. I had the denim, I cut the pattern, the sheet, and I got to sewing because otherwise it was just never going to happen. The only fitting alteration that I made to the pattern was to shorten the sleeves 2.5 inches. And this is part of the reason why I had never had a denim jacket before. Anything that fits my body, that will fit over my bust, ends up being way too long on the sleeves, and I'm short, so I already have a lot of issues with sleeves anyway. And so I knew from the get-go that I had to shorten them, and then I measured them and they were really long anyway, even when you account for folding back. So I shortened them 2.5 inches, and they fit perfectly. When unrolled, they fall at the right place on the wrist, and they are fantastic. Now the pattern itself was pretty easy to follow, and Alina does have a sew along, which was very, very helpful. I 100% followed those instructions, and the only thing I did differently was that I didn't top stitch the seam that goes behind, so the seam on the oh my gosh, the sleeve, because it was just too difficult for me to get my machine to, it was too difficult for me to sort of stuff that sleeve inside out through my machine, and I didn't think I was gonna miss it. But other than that, this jacket, I am so in love with it, and I have gotten the chance to wear it a few times because it's spring and some days it's still in the low 60s, so like denim jacket kind of weather, and I love it. I love it. I went to make another one. I didn't do any distressing, and that's the only thing that I wish I had done. I was sort of treating this jacket as a muslin of sorts, but I mean, it's perfect. Like, it doesn't need to be a muslin or anything. But I will definitely make another one, and I think I want to make it in a darker wash. And it took me about 2 weeks, and I mean, there were other reasons why it took me that long that I'll go into in a minute, but it took me about 2 weeks to finish. But I so enjoyed the process of making this jacket that I didn't feel the need to rush it, and I think that really helped because the top stitching is great on the outside. I'll get to that again in a minute, and just everything about it is so lovely. And now to why this was such a labor of love, and it was not the fault of the pattern. First of all, my Viking machine was sewing the seams fine, but was having a lot of trouble with the top stitching, thread. And it was very messy at the beginning of all the top stitching seams, and sometimes the tension would just pull a lot of the a lot of the top stitching thread to the inside, even in the middle of a seam, and it was just a nightmare. And I did all kinds of adjusting, and it was terrible. And then I had the thought to try it on my then backup machine, which is a Singer Quantum Stylist 9960. And what do you know? My cheap Singer was doing a better top stitching job with top stitching thread than my Viking, and that was preposterous. And I've talked about the fact that that the Viking was not great at buttonholes, and there are a lot of buttonholes on this jacket. So essentially, a lot of the issues that I had with this jacket were driven by the fact that my machine was not performing up to par. So in the middle of the jacket, before I ended up having to do the button, so in the center front, I decided that I just needed to take my Viking to the dealer. So I took my Viking to the dealer for servicing, and in the meantime I finished the jacket on the Singer machine. The Singer machine did a beautiful job with the buttons, or at least good enough, better than my Viking ever could. But oh, and another thing, it was the buttons. I got my buttons from Pacific Trimming, and I foolishly made the first two buttons without having the first two button holes on the flap covers for the pockets on the chest before actually having the buttons. So then I was constricted to what size buttons I could get, so I found them, but I was first given the wrong bag for the buttons, so I had to go back to Pacific Trimming and get the correct bag, and then I came home and I still couldn't make it work. And so I went there again because I thought they had once again given me the bag that was not the right one for my button, but it worked for them. So it was such a long saga, and I was gonna say to make a story short, but the truth is that I've already made this story long. It took me like 2.5 weeks to get this jacket from pattern piece to completion, and it was just a combination of so many things. I ran out of top stitching thread, and then I had to buy a different one, but it wasn't an exact match, and you can't tell in the video here, but if you look really close in person, you can see that they're slightly different shades. Now it doesn't bother me, and at that point I just wanted this jacket done, so I wasn't worrying about that. But yes, long story long, what a labor of love. And I'm noticing that the sun has gone down, so I'm gonna have to change the exposure on this. Oh, I think that's better. Yes, long labor of love, absolutely worth it. I would absolutely make it again. I love it so much. It's great. I highly recommend this pattern. And then because I was so burnt out by the saga of this jacket, I didn't even want to think about making anything, picking up thread, fabric, anything for days and days. And I thought, oh my gosh, I lost my sojo. And then I thought, well, let's see if I can get it back by making something simple. So I made this Scout tee by Grainline Studio in a fabric I've had in my stash, I want to say for about 6 years maybe. I've made something else with it before, but it's a lovely, lightweight, very lightweight floral Swiss dot that I think is perfect for the Scout tee. And I made a size 14 at the bust, tapering down to a size 10 at the hips, because I've said before a lot that I have very small hips so I'm very apple shaped, and I have very small hips for my bust measurements and my waist measurements, so I usually have to taper things down at the hip, and I didn't do any other adjustments. Now, it is a bit baggy. There are no darts on this thing, so to accommodate a large bust, it needs to be baggy because it's a woven, there's no stretch. So the neckline lies flat. This is not it, but the neckline lies flat. But it is a little bit baggy. I think, at the shoulder. So if I was to make it again, I would finagle that a little bit more. But it was a very quick project, basically, you know, like 2-3 hours from tracing the pattern to having a finished product. That didn't actually do anything for my sojo. I've only made a couple things since then. I'm still getting over the trauma of the Hampton jean jacket. But those are the only 2 sewing things that I made in May. Although I say only, but you know, the Hampton jean jacket was a lot of work, so there's that. And then the other thing I made in May was a knitted shawl. It is the Asymmetrical Shawl by Yarnspirations, and it is using their Pantone, the Karen X Pantone yarn. And I don't know if you've seen them, but they're these cute little braids of multicolored yarn that you can probably find at Michael's. That's where I found it. I was walking, I went to Michael's to get some knitting needles, and being the sucker that I am for color, I saw this wall of beautiful little yarn braids, and I have to have some. So I had never seen them before. I had to quickly look up what sort of patterns I could make with it, because there's not very much yarn in one skein. And I found this particular shawl, so I bought 4 skeins, or 4 braids of this yarn, and then I came home and I made this shawl, and it is probably one of the cheapest things I've ever knitted. The entire cost of the yarn was $15.88, which is pretty much next to nothing for yarn, and it is acrylic. But I'm gonna be honest with you, so not all acrylic is created equal, is what I'm trying to say here. And Karen acrylics tend to be good. I like those. I have knitted with very expensive yarn, and those are lovely. I have knitted with Karen yarn like this, and this is lovely. And I think you can find yarn that is good in all the price ranges. But this particular shawl, I mean, there's so much color, and knitting the stripes was interesting, and I had never done striped work like that before. I've done other kinds of color work, but not like that, and I thought that it gave a very otherwise simple shawl really I guess a little bit of oomph. And then there's the asymmetrical aspect of it, and it was just wonderful to knit with. It was lovely. The only thing is that there's so many ends to weave in at the end, but I love it. And I haven't actually, well, I think I used it once because it hasn't been sweater yarn weather in a while, but it is so pretty. And I mean, for that kind of price, you really can't knock it. And it took me, I think, a week to finish from beginning to end, and that's just knitting a little bit here and there because I usually have more than one project on the needles. And that is all that I have for you today. Those are 3 things that I finished in May, and I'm okay with the Scout tee. I love the other 2. And if you have any questions about anything that I have said today, about any of these patterns or anything of the sort, please let me know in the comments, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!